We're going to be working with procedures, user-defined functions, and triggers. And we're going to start out with procedures. They're similar to views in that you create the procedure and it is saved as a database object. Where it is a little different from a view is that you can pass the procedure parameters, which is data, and the procedure can execute code using the data that you pass. And procedures can also return output parameters. Okay, so you can send it data and it can send you data back. So that's where it's a little different from a view. For the first one that we're going to create, it's just going to be a simple select that we're going to be creating as a procedure. And then we actually have to execute procedures. So in that sense, they're a little different from a view too, because a view, you do a select from the same way you select from a table, whereas a procedure has to be executed. So our first scenario is our boss would like us to create a stored procedure that selects the vendor name, invoice number, invoice date, and the invoice total from invoices. And to do this, we have to join invoices and vendors on the vendor ID. And we only want to see rows that have a balance. So the invoice total minus the credit total minus the payment total has to be more than 0. And once we have our result set, we want to sort the whole thing by vendor name. So I have already launched SSMS. I've entered task 1, and we're just going to start by doing the select by itself without creating the stored procedure. So we're going to be using the AP database. And you can see we're selecting all of the data that the boss wants. And we're selecting from invoices, joining to vendors on the vendor ID in each. And our where clause is looking for basically a balance greater than 0. And then we're going to order the whole thing by vendor name. So let's execute that. So what we're going to be doing with this is putting it into a stored procedure. And for a stored procedure, it has to be the first command in a batch. So after the word go is where we're going to put the create procedure command. So we're going to say create proc. And it's kind of a standard to put SP in front of the name, and SP is for stored procedure. And we're going to call it invoice report. And then we're going to put in the keyword as. So this is very similar to views. In fact, this could be a view because we're not passing it any parameters and it's not returning any data to us. But we are creating the stored procedure here. So we're going to go ahead and run it. And then you'll notice that it's not displaying any output because this is now a stored procedure. And to see the output, we have to execute the stored procedure. So I'm going to move that closing comment down. And then to execute this, we're just going to say exec and then give it the name. So the name is SP invoice report. And we'll go ahead and run it. Now there is another way that you can run a stored procedure. If the stored procedure is the first thing in a batch, you can just simply use the stored procedure name. If it's not the first thing in a batch, it won't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to try adding it below the exec statement. Now this isn't going to work because it's now the second thing in a batch. So we're going to execute, okay, and we're getting an error. And that is because this is now the second statement in a batch, and it's unhappy with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put go in here, and then we're going to move that command right below go. And now it should work. It actually should execute the stored procedure twice. So we'll go ahead and execute. And it did execute the first time because now this is the first line in the batch. And for the exec statement, it doesn't matter what line in the batch it is, it'll work regardless. Okay, so at this point, you are going to want to save your script as chapter 15 textbook assignment. And I'm going to move that closing comment down. So our next little scenario here is our boss decided they would like the SP invoice report to hide the code used in the stored procedure when it is run. So we're going to have to do a little alter statement and add encryption. So we're basically going to have to do that whole entire script again with our alter command at the beginning. So I'm going to copy all of this down here. And then right after go, I'm going to say alter procedure SP invoice report with encryption. And then let me get rid of this line. Now, just in case you are wondering, where are these stored? I'm going to quick show you. So if you expand your database, you'll notice there's a programmability folder. And if you expand that, there's a stored procedure folder. And it's inside there that you're going to see your actual stored procedures. Okay, and you'll notice that user-defined functions and triggers will also be stored in here. So now that I've got this alter statement, I am going to go ahead and run it. Okay, and it completed successfully. So at this point, the user is not going to be able to see the code that was used to create the procedure. Without encryption, they can actually see the code used to create it. Now you may be wondering, how would the user be able to view that code? Well, if they know where the stored procedure is stored, normally you just right-click, go to Script, Stored Procedure As, Create To, and you can actually generate all of the code that was used, all the code we see here, you can generate that in a query window. If you put encryption on it and you try to use this command, you're going to get an error. Okay, and the error is basically saying the text is encrypted. Okay, so that is probably the primary reason that you would want to encrypt these, because then nobody can see the code that you used to create it. And just so you can see what it looks like if it's not encrypted, I'll quick do another little one, and then I'm going to delete it. So let me see, I'll copy this. Let me move this down. And we'll just call this number 2 here. I'm going to end up deleting this. So this is not something that you have to do. I just want to show you the difference between encryption and no encryption. Okay, so I'm putting a little number 2 on the end of this one. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of this. And if I refresh my AP database, and I kind of expand out here, you're going to see now I have two of them. So the second one is not encrypted. So I can actually go to Create To and New Query Window, and it's going to show me all of the code. Okay, the encrypted one will not do that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So you can delete using SSMS. Otherwise, you can drop the stored procedure. Either one should work. And now I just have the one that I actually want.